Recently I did my first Stromboli and I did it on the Yoder Smoker's wood-fired oven. It turned out phenomenal. I know a bunch of you have already tried it. You left some comments down below, sent me some emails, and people liked it. So today I'm doing a Stromboli video, but we're doing it on my Kamado Joe Big Joe. The process is a little different, but the result will be very, very similar. Before we can get into that, we gotta get our Joe going. So our Joe's been going for a little while. We're rocking 450. I'm using my traditional setup where I add some spacers between the diffuser and the pizza stone. So I've got everything on the top rock, then my diffuser plates, then I've got 3 rocks that I always use. It gives me about 2 inches of a gap there, and then we put our pizza stone on top. We're letting that preheat for a good 25 minutes, even 30 minutes. Get that nice and warm so when we put our dough on there, it starts to cook right away. Speaking of dough, here is our dough. I made this yesterday. It's looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. Let me go through the process here. What we did is we took 350 grams of warm water between 90 and 95. This happened to be 96, close enough. We put in 13 grams of fine sea salt, stirred that in. You want to stir that in and dissolve it all. Then we add 1.5 grams of active dry yeast, and then we add 500 grams of flour. For this particular recipe, I'm using all-purpose flour. It's gonna give us a little bit of a breadier dough, which this is what I want for a Stromboli. You could use whatever your preference is though. Then what I did is I put it in my KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook. We mixed for about 5 or 6 minutes on medium till it started to come together, and then I let it rest for a good 20 minutes. Now, this particular batch turned out to be quite sticky. My house is very humid, and my wife's really into plants, so we've got a whole bunch of humidifiers in here, and it's just a little bit more humid than normal. So you can add a little bit more flour if you need to, but try not to, okay? So after it rested for 20 minutes, we just covered it up, put some foil or some oil on there with some saran wrap, let it relax for 20 minutes, and then I kneaded it again for 5 or 6 minutes by hand. I added a little bit of a little bit of flour as needed until our dough got to the point where I can handle it. You get yourself a bench scraper, right? I like to move around the dough if it gets sticky, and you can fold it over itself and just knead it in that way. Then what we did is we made it into a ball, tucked it all inside, and want to make sure you seal that bottom, and then we put it inside an old container, like one of these guys, and we let it rise until it got twice as big. Took about 3 hours for this particular situation, but lots of times it'll be done in 2 hours. Once it's doubled in size, then we divide it in 2, about 425 grams or so, 430 grams each. And then you make another dough ball, you put it, in my case, this time what I did is I put it back in these containers here. These are great because you can see when it doubles. But I put each dough ball in one of these and I threw it back in the fridge. And about 2 hours ago, I took this out, so it's room temperature now, and we can get into making our Stromboli. Couple things here. So I've got some bacon that I already cooked, just some bacon crumbs. We've got some onions here that I've softened with some olive oil. Cook them at a lower temperature and just let them break down so they're nice and soft. The other thing I did here is this pepperoni was quite greasy, okay? So what I did is I put it between paper towel on a plate, and I cooked it for 30 seconds on high in the microwave, and I just pressed out all the grease, right? Inside something like a Stromboli, if you get really, really greasy pepperoni, it just kind of makes it all soggy inside. So it's got nowhere to go. It's gonna stay inside of there. So I like to just dry it out a little bit, remove some of that grease, and I just think it turns out a better, funner product. Totally optional if you wanna do that. Got some parchment paper here. We're gonna use this to make our dough on. What we want to do here is we're going to get this guy out. And this will be a little bit sticky, okay? I got a little bit of oil in here. I'm just gonna put a little bit on here. But our goal here is to make this into a rectangle. So we're gonna roll it like so. And you wanna leave this like a good 1/4 of an inch thick, okay? So now that our dough's rolled out, it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. What you want to do is you want to get your sauce. Now this sauce is super simple. I've made it a bunch on the channel, but it's just 1 can of tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt, 3/4 of a tablespoon of pepper, couple basil leaves, and I turn it on high and use pulse, and I go 3 times for about 1 second each. Makes a super simple sauce, but it's going to be nice and fresh and bright for our Stromboli, and then we start to put it together. So for this one, we're using 3 different kinds of cheeses. We're going to start with some provolone. We'll put a nice layer of that across the bottom. Then I'm going to get out some Parmesan, put a nice little coating of Parmesan on there, and then we'll start to put our toppings on. So I've got some bacon here that I made up earlier, spread that out across, get a nice even layer of that, and then I've got some red onions that I sauteed for about 10 minutes, make them nice and soft. They've got some olive oil in them, and then some garlic infused salt. Then for our final cheese, we're going to use some freshly grated mozzarella. We'll put a nice heavy coating on that. And oh, I almost forgot the pepperoni. So we'll put the pepperoni on here, put a nice even layer, and then we'll start to roll this up. So the big thing when you roll this up is that it's going to take a little bit of patience and a little bit of practice. The more you do it, the easier it'll get, but you want to lift over top so that you can try and prevent your toppings from moving forward. Take your time. This is going to be a little frustrating, especially if you just put so many toppings on it like I did. You want to keep the edges of the dough dry, so don't be afraid to use a piece of paper towel and wipe off some sauce if it gets too close to the edge or anything like that. But what we're going to do is we're just going to keep rolling and tucking and rolling and tucking until we get the final product. Now in this particular case, I did tear the one side a little bit, so I tried to pinch the dough together to seal that up. But what we're going to do is we're going to give it a nice seal. We're going to pull up that dough across the edge, and then eventually that seam is going to go on the bottom. Before we can do that, a couple people tried this and they had issues with the Stromboli sticking to the parchment paper. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a little bit of olive oil. We've got some in our container. We'll just put a nice coating of that in the center of the parchment paper, and then we will lift up our Stromboli and put it seam side down, right in the center, and then that way it'll help it not stick. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on our ends here. I use some paper towel to dry out the dough. I want to make sure that they stick and doesn't explode. And there's our Stromboli. So we've only got a couple more steps here. Most importantly, right, you need to slice out so the air and the steam can escape. If you don't do that, you're going to ruin your Stromboli. So first we're going to start with an egg wash. Just give this a good beating. You can use a touch of water to thin it out, but not too much. Put a nice little coating of this. This is going to help give it that golden brown we're looking for. Don't go crazy with it, just a nice light coating here. Perfect. The best thing here is a serrated knife, but any sharp knife will work. But basically I'm going to put some slots in here real quick. Roughly about the size that I'm going to cut. And there we go. Last thing we'll do is we'll just take some scissors here. And then what we'll do is we'll just slide that on here, and let's go put it on our Joe. So now our Stromboli is on our Joe. We're sitting around 450, and we're gonna go for 25 to 30 minutes. Now, if your Joe happens to get away from you a little bit and it's run a little higher than you want, before you put on your Stromboli, just take a piece of paper towel with some cold water on it and wipe down your stone. That'll just help cool it back down a little bit so you don't burn the bottom. Here we are. It's been 25 minutes. It's looking pretty darn delicious. We did get a little bit of a blowout here at the side, as you can see. Unfortunately, I pulled the dough a little thin there. Here's what we're gonna try and do here. rid of some of this burnt cheese here. And there we are. Now this, my friends, definitely needs to cool down for at least 20 minutes. So it's been 25 minutes. Let's cut into it and see how we look. It's still quite warm. This will hold temperature for a long time, so don't be afraid to let it sit even longer. And that, my friends, is what a tasty meal looks like. You can see the bottom there. All right, enough drooling. Let's cut in here and have a little bite. I mean, look, tell me that does not look good. You can warm up your sauce here and dip it in it. I think we will, oh, we're dropping some cheese. We will just bite this how it is right now. Oh yeah. Some like caramelized onions and bacon to me are just like heaven in your mouth, and they come right through. That, my friends, is absolutely phenomenal. It is so tasty. I wish you could try it yourself. If you've never made Stromboli before, give it a shot. I mean, I know it's just like a rolled up pizza, but it just hits different. It's a completely different experience. It will be a little bit of a challenge the first time or two, but after that, you will make these time and time again. They feed a bunch of people, and I think you're gonna like it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe while you're down there. Thanks, as always, for watching. I'll see you soon.